All right. So my number two is Sullivan's Travels. Came out in 1941, directed by Preston Sturges, starring Joel McCrea, Veronica Lake, Robert Warwick. And the brief synopsis is Hollywood director John L. Sullivan sets out to experience life as a homeless person in order to gain relevant life experience for his next picture. So I watched this movie during the pandemic for the first time because I had this is a great video series on YouTube, which I don't know if you checked out, but I highly recommend it, called "What's in Your Criterion Closet" or Criterion
Oh,
Closet Picks.
yeah, it's
And
great. Yeah.
yeah, and I so many people kept picking up this movie, and I was like, oh, I've seen a few other of Preston's movies, but I had not seen this one, so I really seeked it out, and it hit me pretty hard. And maybe it was watching it in a pandemic year, but I think it does speak to, and you know this about me, Alex, this sort of existential crisis side of me, which is perennial. I feel like I've always had it from what I can
Uh-huh.
remember, which is like, what is life about? Should I be doing something more? Whatever the stuff that I'm doing, is there meaning behind it? The people that I engage with, should they be richer? Should I be richer as in thought and mind? Should I be bringing more to these interactions? And I'm always sort of questioning that at various points in my life, sometimes even during a day, in a meeting or an interaction with a friend, where I'm maybe a little judgmental on myself and perhaps even them, just in sort of wanting it to be more. And I think what this movie really does so brilliantly and lightly in Preston's hands is that, yeah, all those questions are valid, and we as humans will keep questioning them. But at the same time, there is levity and value in whatever you are doing and
Hmm.
whoever you are engaging with, no matter how silly and light and meaningless it might feel on the surface. But the point is, if you're doing it well and if your heart is in it, it does matter and there is value to it. And of course, the movie is doing this in a very literal way about movies, because the main character makes comedies, and he's questioning that what is the worth of these movies, and I should probably go and make something that's more dramatic and more visceral and has more lofty expectations. And that's why he goes on this whole journey. And then, for those who haven't seen the movie, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, but he, as living as a homeless person, he ends up at a prison somehow, and there he watches all his prison inmates watching a Walt Disney cartoonist, laughing their faces off and just connecting with each other and having that moment of joy and happiness. And in that moment, he realizes that how much laughter and just connecting with each other in a common space matters,
Hmm.
and the power of that. So that's in a more literal sense, which I also gravitate towards. But I think there's like a higher theme to it, which is that on paper, stuff that feels more weighty is what we think matters, and there's truth to that. But there's a lot more that matters in life as well. So that's why I gravitate towards this movie. Again, I'm not this way on all days, and I don't think Joel McCrea's character is like that on all days either. Even though the movie ends on a positive note that,
Right.
okay, I'm back to Hollywood making a comedy again, I'm pretty sure the next morning he's facing the same questions again. This is our curse, but also the gift, I feel like, of being humans. And some feel it more than others. I definitely feel it. And I'm frankly grateful for that questioning spirit in me. I want to keep questioning. And I'll talk more about that in my number one pick. But I think what this movie cites to me is the importance of taking a step back and appreciating where you're at, what you have in your life, and recognizing the value of that, because there is something to be said about that.
Hmm.
And the fact that you are where you are there because of the decisions you made and what life afforded you, and the people who are in your life made sort of pathways for you. And there is value in that. But other than that, like, if you looked at this movie and didn't want to think deeply about it, it's really funny. It's super light. It's a great movie about movies, which, we both love and many others too. And it's not, it can be preachy. Like a movie like this can be very preachy and sentimental. And, it is a little bit, but it's also a movie from the 40s. Considering it's a movie from the 40s, I think it's very light. It's very light on its touch, which again makes it kind of a classic. So yeah, that's my number two, Sullivan's Life.
Yeah, so I'd never seen this film before, so I'm very glad. And actually, any Preston Sturges film, so I'm very glad you put it on this list so I could watch it. I mean, I'd heard of it because in the film, the movie that he's trying to make, the serious one, is "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," which was the Coen brothers film, and that's why they titled it that, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. So I'd known about this movie even back then in the early 2000s, but just had never bothered to pick up and watch it. And I did really enjoy it. It's interesting, I think because it was a movie about movies and then got very meta in terms of this statement about this director who makes comedies, wants to make something serious. It feels then artificial to him until he actually is placed in that prison. But then he realizes that, well, comedy is great too. I don't need to make something serious. And I'm going to go back to making comedies. It almost seemed to me like a answer to, at the time in like the 30s and 40s, like the Grapes of Wrath, the very like socially conscious films. There were a lot of those at the time. Like Sturges is trying to say like, no, I'm just going to make comedies. Like, and that's important too. And parts of the movie, it's interesting because there's a whole chunk of the film which literally could be Grapes of Wrath, like very serious. So it's like he's trying to have his cake and eat it too, saying like, well, I'm going to do something that's funny because I'm a comedy director, Preston Sturges, and writer. But I'm going to make this film, but bury in all these very serious themes, but not make it too serious because I'm at the same time mocking things that are too serious. Because I think there's a lot of like, again, not mocking, but sort of judging, like, oh, you think you're so serious? Like, you're just a movie. Like, you're these rich screenwriters that are writing about these poor people. Like, they don't want to hear this. You shouldn't be doing this. It's like looking down upon these films that have messages, which I feel there's a place for both. And this film might've been too much saying that, oh, no, there isn't. But at the same time, the movie's a mix of both. So it was very interesting. Like, it works on so many levels. And I think I got so enthralled in that portion of what the film was trying to do that I kind of missed this theme that you pulled out, which is this questioning of like, what is your purpose in life and does it matter? Which really is a whole other theme in the movie that I didn't even pick up on until you mentioned that. But yeah, it is something that we all do struggle with, especially maybe people that are working in professions that are not, doctors or teachers or these things that we need in society. I mean, our jobs could disappear and not really going to do anything to advancement of the human race. So you are kind of questioning like, well, what am I really then putting into the world? And I think, as Preston Sturges probably went through the same thing himself of like, well, I'm not making Grapes of Wrath. I'm just making these lighthearted comedies. What am I really even doing? And I think it does say, well, he's saying, no, look, I can still get real themes into my films like I did. But at the end of the day, like laughter is very important. And just light entertainment is incredibly important too, which I definitely believe in myself. I think there's a place for both. It also just made me think a lot about, famous comedic directors that then kind of, I think maybe went through this crisis themselves and then they go off and they make more serious films. Like Peter Farrelly of the Farrelly Brothers, Dumb and Dumber, all these, quote unquote stupid comedies in the 90s. Okay, now he's going to go off and make Green Book and this more serious film, or Adam McKay with Step Brothers and Anchorman. And now he's making, more serious films like Big Short and Vice. So I wonder if this is something that still goes on with directors today. I feel like these comedy directors that feel like comedy maybe isn't as viewed as important, but I agree that comedy is important. And I think this movie speaks to that. So I'm definitely glad and it's very funny. Like, as you pointed out, I think a lot of really funny scenes. It definitely makes me go want to watch some more Preston Sturges films. I thought it was great. I really enjoyed it. And I like your theme too around this self-reflection, existential crisis, which is something I did not pick up when I first saw it, but it just makes the film look deeper even as I look back on it now. So
I'm very glad you watched it. And yeah, I highly recommend all of this stuff. And to a point of, this is probably happening today as well with the directors you mentioned, is because this existential crisis question that we talked about, I think it's a common question that every human faces.
Yeah.
And the Hollywood industry is no exception. They also are constantly questioning that, oh, if you're going to give the top prize to, a lighthearted comedy, would that be worth it? And that's
Right.
why historically comedies don't do that well. So
Mhm.
I think there's, like you said, there's like so many meta qualities to this movie, but I'm very glad you watched it.
Yeah, no. Again, thanks for putting my your list, because I wanted to see this for a long time, ever since I saw Brother Art Thou, and I'm glad I finally did.
Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.